before I get started, did anybody hear from Joe? Is he not going to be here tonight, or? Nobody knows. All right. Hopefully he'll log on here in a second. All right. Well, it's 5 o'clock. We'll call the October 26, 2021 Fire District 5 Commissioner meeting to order. And there's Joe right on cue. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey. Chairman Wilsey.
He looks frozen, Tanya.
He does. It's a good profile shot there.
All right. Am I back?
You're back.
All right.
Chairman
It was a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any commissioner absences coming up? Seeing none. Any communications to the board?
None this week.
Perfect. So it looks like we have Dynamics here to give us a presentation on the standard of cover.
Yeah, good evening. Dynamics is here in Zoom world. They're actually up here at 5.0 as well. They're going to Zoom from Alder. But I wanted to just lead off a little bit and introduce to remind people of the process and introduce both Stuart and Mary Ellen from Dynamics, and then we'll Chief Waters will bring them into the meeting and make them panelists, and we can go over the presentation they have for us. But shortly after I got up to 5.0 in May, we contracted with a company out of Florida called Dynamics to do our standard of cover, or excuse me, our community risk assessment standard of cover. And we've been working with them for the last 6+ months on putting together a product that we are rolling out to the board tonight. Technically, it's still in draft form. We're not asking for the board to take any action tonight. We're just going to get a presentation from Mary Ellen and Stuart, and then allow the board, you guys, time to chew on it, process it, and then we'll take action at a later. Ask you to take action at a later meeting. But Mary Ellen and Stuart, this is their second trip up here in person to Gig Harbor. They came up earlier in the process, and to just kind of be with us in Gig Harbor, have some stakeholder meetings, get a lay of the land, if you will. And then they came back up here today to make the presentation. They met with command staff for a couple hours this afternoon. I just wanted to publicly say thank you to Stuart McCutcheon and Mary Ellen Harper, the dynamic duo at Dynamics that put together a product that, quite honestly, we would not have been able to do on our own, certainly not on the same timeline and with the same quality. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Mary Ellen, and then she will screen share and go over the presentation with the board, and then be available for questions from any of the board members. So without further ado, Mary Ellen, you can take it away. I think you might be on mute still, Mary Ellen.
Okay, how about now? Can you hear me now?
That's great.
Okay, and now everybody can see the screen? All right, how about that? Are we working now?
We're working.
Excellent, great, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Nick. My name is Mary Ellen Harper. I am one of the two principals from Dynamics Consulting, and with me tonight is my partner, Stuart McCutcheon.
Hello.
And what we are here tonight to do is to present a community risk assessment standards of cover to you. So there's two parts. The first part is the community risk assessment. And with that, what we do is we look at the risks and the hazards that are present within your response district. And then we correlate the types and numbers of resources that are required to mitigate these risks, and then the frequency with which they're expected to occur. I'm going to go over that really briefly, just to kind of give you an overview of what the community risk assessment is. And then Stuart is going to jump into the standards of cover, which is your fire department's response performance, their ability to muster a specified number of firefighters based on the risk profile, and a gap analysis comparing your performance to industry standards. I wanted to let you know that as part of this project, stakeholder input is really important. Obviously, the fire department is here to serve the community, and we needed to get some input from the community as well as the internal stakeholders. While we were here about 8 weeks ago, we spent a full day talking to more than a dozen different groups of people, elected officials, appointed officials, firefighters on the front lines. Normally, we would have wanted to meet with members of your community, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we did not do that. What we instead did is we created a 7-question survey that was put online by Gig Harbor Fire and Medic 1 from September 7th until October of 2021. And we did get 179 residents and business owners that completed the survey and did give some input into this process as well. What we found is that your members of your community in general are very pleased with the services that are offered by your fire department. And I wanted to take a minute to point out that that really is a credit to the people of Gig Harbor who are on the front lines providing that consistent high level of service to the community. So, with that, we want to just make sure we give the appropriate gratitude to the men and women of Gig Harbor who are providing those services. Just real quick, coming out of the community excerpt survey, what we found was when we asked about the ability of Gig Harbor Fire and Medic 1 to respond to emergencies, the vast majority of the respondents felt that they are responding in a timely manner. 84% agreed with that statement, another 62 strongly agreed. So you're always going to have some people that disagree, but the vast majority of your participants were very happy with the response times. When we talked about respect, again, very high numbers for Gig Harbor Fire Medic 1. 111 of the people that responded felt very strongly that Gig Harbor Fire Medic 1 treats people with respect. Another 54 agreed with that statement. When we talked about priorities, the community had some very strong ideas of what they were interested in seeing. And the most common responses we saw were that they wanted to see additional staffing. They're interested in seeing a ladder truck. And there was a very clear request for more community outreach. And that was in the form of community risk assessment, education, fire prevention education, and just involvement with the community. And then, obviously there's a dollar figure attached to all of these things. So when we asked the question about whether the people responding to the survey felt that the taxes that they pay to support fire emergency services delivery were appropriate, 71 people strongly agreed with that statement, and an additional 72 agreed with it. So the majority of the people did feel that they are getting what they pay for. And then when we asked if there was an appetite to be supportive of increases to taxes to improve the service delivery, again, there was an appetite for that. 75 people strongly agreed with it, and another 50 agreed with that. A little bit about the community profile. Gig Harbor is interesting in that it's a response district. It's not a straight municipality. So when we look at census data, it doesn't always exactly align with the area that you respond in. What this was done is through Esri, they were able to put a graphic file together and look at the exact parameters of where you provide service. And in general, you have a very educated community. 47% of your residents have a bachelor's or a graduate degree. Additional 33% have attended some college. It's a predominantly white community. 87.4% of your population is white. Average median household income is about $107,000, and the unemployment rate is low. It's 4.6%. What we do want to kind of look at is the at-risk populations. These are populations that are going to likely need the services of the fire department in the event of an emergency. And they may be more susceptible to having injuries or other casualties as a result of emergencies because of their at-risk status. And people that fall into that category are those age 65 and older, and you do have 12,674 people within your response district that fit into that category. Even additional 3,890 households that include at least one member who has a documented disability. You've got 5% or 879 different households in your response area that do fall below the poverty level. And additionally, you have 508 households with no vehicle. And that's important when we're talking about emergencies that could involve the need to evacuate, be it wildfires or storms or anything else. If you've got people that don't have a mechanism to evacuate, that's going to become something that the fire department is going to need to keep in mind and have a plan to help mitigate. And then when we look at insurance, again, you have a pretty well-to-do population. The majority of your population does have insurance. So when we looked at the community risk assessment, we wanted to keep it in line with Pierce County because obviously that's the county plan that you fall in line with. And what we did is we looked at the hazards identified by Pierce County, and then we identified how they specifically relate to Gig Harbor. And we did that with a couple different factors. The first thing was likelihood, and there's different categories ranging from whether something's almost certain to occur or all the way down to whether it would rarely occur. And each one of those has a category for it. And then we looked at the impact, is it going to be an insignificant impact or could it be catastrophic or will it fall somewhere in between? So for each of the risks identified in the hazard plan, we correlated the likelihood on the left along with, the impact, which was across the top, and then you meet in the middle and see whether that's going to be an extreme risk, a high risk, a moderate risk, or a low risk. And what we found was that within Gig Harbor, your extreme risks, which is really where you want to focus your initial planning efforts and resources, would be your wildland fires, your severe storms, droughts, earthquakes, energy emergencies, epidemics, pandemics, and hazardous materials. You've also got some high risks associated with climate changes, and then moderate risks that come along with transportation accidents, terrorism, abandoned mines, and civil disturbances. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Stuart for the SOC part of the project.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Stuart McCutcheon. I'm just going to give you the highlights as much as anything to provide an overview of what's contained within this section, as well as provide a little description to each as we go. So as we look at service demand, year over year, we're seeing a fairly consistent increase. 2020 was an off year for most jurisdictions across the country with a slight reduction when we had that pullback. But I would expect to see that you're on par to more than likely meet 2019, if not exceed it. And then the map on the right is just a map of the district with the city of Gig Harbor boundaries. Overall, nearly 80% of your service demand is related to EMS and about 2% fire, with the rest attributed to good intent calls or false alarms, things of that nature. I want to just briefly mention something about data. As we walk through this process, one of the things that almost always occurs with one of these projects, and certainly with this one, is that as we go through and we take a hard look at our data, we recognize and identify all the ways we can improve and get better. So this is the first shot. This is based on data that we had not looked at with this much scrutiny before. And so moving forward, there are several mechanisms currently in place that's going to increase our data quality and our data reliability. And so just keep in mind that this is the first time that we are taking a look and establishing our benchmarks and fully expect that you're going to see improvements moving forward because of improvements in data quality. The map to your right-hand side is a hotspot map. So this is showing not how many incidents actually occurred, but where incidents are occurring in close proximity to one another. So where is the majority of our density happening? And that's within the city of Gig Harbor, or in and around and to the south of Station 51, and then more or less along that 16 corridor, with the exception of some activity over by Station 59. In this map, we're looking at over a 3-year period. The district's broken out to 2.5-acre hexagons. And so what we're looking at is how many calls occurred in each of these hexagons. And the reason this is important is because we are going to have some areas within the district where our response performance is going to take us a while to get there. However, we need to compare that to how frequently are we actually responding to these areas, and are we utilizing our resources to the best of our abilities. And so later you'll see a map very similar to this that shows the average travel time within the same areas of these calls. And when you see those extended travel times, I would encourage you to compare that with this map to see, are we having extended travel times to areas where we have a lot of call activity, or are those the areas to where count on two hands how many calls occurred within a 3-year time period. Here's some generally all this together is called temporal variation. So we're looking at the patterns that occur over different periods of time. So throughout the year, you're fairly consistent. Then when we look at day of week, people go to work Monday morning, they're active during the work week. It takes people to generate emergency calls. And so that's when we're seeing an uptick in activity. The same as when we look by hour of day, around 6 o'clock in the morning, people will get up and start moving. Peaks around midday and stays fairly steady through the afternoon, then begins to taper and taper off as we go past that 6 o'clock hour at night. And then the graphic at the bottom depicts a similar combination of day and hour. The darker brown the color, the higher the activity, and then the darker blue the color would be the lowest levels of activity. So in this piece, and I think this was one of the critical pieces of how we're going to depict our performance, Gig Harbor is extremely unique. And this was something I think that was one of the big linchpins in how are we going to capture, quantify, and describe our different performance metrics. And so tried a few different ways: the road network, the lack of interconnectivity, reduction of ability to really hit any kind of great highway speeds within the district in general, particularly in a large apparatus, affects the fire department's ability to respond with travel times. And so it just so happened as we were going through trying different ways of finding a methodology that we clearly convey, it so happened that if you took all the incidents that happened within 1.5 miles of a fire station, or all the incidents that happened within the city of Gig Harbor, that the travel times were within just a few seconds of each other at the 90th percentile. And so we decided, let's call that area the municipal response area. So if you live within the city or the municipal boundaries of Gig Harbor, or within 1.5 miles of a staff fire station, we're going to have performance metrics that we're going to beat, that we're going to meet at the 90th percentile or better. The rest of that area, the main peninsula, so all areas not within the city of Gig Harbor or not within 1.5 miles of the staff fire station, but on the main peninsula, are the rural response areas. And so there'll be performance criteria and goals for that. And then finally, remote response zones. Those are your 2 islands, Fox Island and Raft Island, and they will be the final. This is some quick assumptions and exclusions that we did with the data, and this is important because we want to be able to replicate this in the future. We want very much so someone could come in behind us, double check our work, come in with the same answers, so that way this process can continue forward. So some of the exclusions or some of the assumptions we did was everything's calculated at the 90th percentile, and so this is different from average. This is 90% of the time we will do this well or better. For exclusions, for call processing turnout times, anything in excess of 15 minutes, we excluded. Travel response, total response, anything over 30 minutes, we excluded. And because at the time this data represented, we were not capturing emergency or not emergency calls within our call types, we excluded 500, 600, 800, 900 series calls, which are typically non-emergency or special event. And so good intent, cancel in a route, severe weather, or a special incident type. There were some limitations of the data as much as anything. Just prior to us taking a hard look at it, there were some things that weren't being captured that throughout this process, and a few other things the department's doing internally, they've corrected, but we've had these listed here as some of the limitations that we had to just live with for this data. And that's why I suggested at the beginning of this, we're going to improve from here because we've corrected a lot of the initial issues that were found with historical data. So the chart on the left is called concurrency. And so when calls are occurring, this is how often a single incident, 2 incidents, 3 or more, and so on and so forth are occurring. So when you have someone responding to a call 50% of the time, there's only 1 incident occurring. However, the other 50% of the time, there are multiple incidents occurring. 2 incidents at the same time would be about 1/3. And then the rest of that group, so about 20%, would be that we're having 3, 4, 5 or more incidents occurring simultaneously. And the reason that's important is when we look at our ability to assemble an effective response force, or the minimum number of firefighters needed to safely and effectively mitigate a call type. If we have multiple calls occurring simultaneously, that's staffing that we don't have available to us. And so that needs to be accounted for either through changes in deployment, the use of mutual or automatic aid, or things of that nature. The table on the right is unit hour utilization. And so this is really a crew utilization rate. How busy are these crews? And what this is showing us is what percentage of the time over this 3-year period were these units or crews committed to running emergency calls from the time from dispatch until the time that this unit cleared. And so for your rescues in particular, or I'm sorry, your medic units in particular, Medic 51 is approaching 20%, with 58 and 59 hovering around 15%. And so You'll see in there Enrico County, Virginia did a study. There's no real hard data on unit hour utilization that you can necessarily tie to, but I will say this: if we're using a 90th percentile to calculate performance and a crew is only available 80% of the time, right off the bat, we've lost 10%, where other units are having to come in to be the first responder within there. And so other things that happen is because these don't all happen back to back and they're spaced out through the day, after you exceed about 20%, it gets very difficult for crews to get all their fire and EMS training done, additional duties, and fatigue and burnout tend to set in after those points. So what I would say is as you hit these levels or as you start climbing into the 20s, it'd probably be a good idea to have a unit of that type, since you are 80% EMS, on that CIP at some point to add additional resources. Because really at the end of the day, there's only ever two problems. Either you can't get there from here, there's no stations within the area, or you don't have enough units to service the demand within these areas. This is for performance. This is a quick overview of the response time continuum. So the big three are call processing, the time the calls received at the dispatch center until a first unit's dispatched, turnout, the units dispatched until they begin to physically go en route, and then travel times are en route till they get on scene. Some combinations of these together, travel time and turnout time together, are response time. And if we look at the entire piece, from the time a citizen calls 911 until that first unit shows up, that's total response time. So call processing is done by South Sound 911, and so it's outside of the purview of the district and the fire department. But overall, we're looking at about 2 minutes for call processing, and really that's not that bad. Just for the sake of consistency, broke it up by call type and by response performance zone in the graph to the right, but we're still hovering in and around that 2 minute mark. For turnout time, this is a part the fire department can control, but this isn't all just simply call compliance. Things like station design, staffing methods, or we cross staffing units, and other factors can affect turnout time. Overall, we're looking at about 2.5 minutes, but then when we look by individual call type, EMS is a little faster than that at 220, 230, and 240, depending on the zone. Fires are closer to 3 minutes. And so what I will tell you with that is, since 80% of our call volume is EMS, it's going to be very close to the total because it's 80%. Our fires, our hazardous conditions represent a much smaller database. And so it will take fewer outliers to cause some issues. And because we know that our current data quality is going to be much better than what we're currently using, I wouldn't get too wound up around the axle about this today. We'll use this as our initial line in the sand. And as we start analyzing this newer data, then we can really start looking at how our performance is going. Next is travel time. And so I think this is probably, as much as anything, when we talk about how do we end up coming up with our response performance zones. If we look at really any one of these, you can see there's some uniformity in not only how the graphs are spaced out, but there's some significant time differences between each of these. So for example, for fire and EMS, municipal performance is about 3 minutes better than rural, which is about 4 minutes better than remote. And that trend continues on and throughout. And so while I am suggesting these times may actually get better as we look at higher data quality, I would expect that the spread would be similar. And it's important that we convey this message to our citizens of the actual abilities of the department to provide these levels of service. So here's the travel map. If you remember the one earlier where I spoke about, we want to make sure that we're, when we see some of these longer or extended travel times, how that compares with the actual call volumes up in the Northeast and down on Fox Island and Raft Island. We have some extended travel times. However, there's also fairly low call volume in those areas. And so I think just internally, we need to strike a balance between how can we best utilize our resources for the most good across the district as a whole. Finally, response performance. Within the standard to cover a step, we established both response performance goals as well as total response, because we can't necessarily control call processing, but total response time is something that accreditation with one if you wanted to pursue that. And so Department accreditations provided through the Center for Public Safety Excellence. There's a couple of different steps to have you go through. This community risk assessment and standard of cover is one of them. And this will provide a good baseline, but response performance follows a very similar trend to your travel time performance. And then finally, total response time. And you see that trend occur once again throughout these different call types, throughout the different performance zones. And these would be the overall goals or the actual conditions observed by the folks calling 911 and requesting assistance. Just to give you an idea of what some of our performance goals are, we've just got fire and EMS up here, so a couple of the big ones. So in our municipal zone, our baseline or what our actual performance we saw, 12 minutes and 22 seconds, the 90th percentile. The benchmark would be NFPA 1710, so 6 minutes and 20 seconds. Probably a bridge too far today, but an organizational goal of 11 minutes. So we can trim a little time off call processing, a little time off a turnout, and have units ready to go and getting there directly. That's a goal we could begin to approach. And then it's going to be very similar for rural and remote response areas. For EMS, you can see a difference here. We went from 12.5 to 10.5 for our municipal areas. Again, it's because we got so much more data within that data set. The data quality and reliability is going to be higher with a larger data set. But with what we had today, our baseline or actual performance is just over 10.5 minutes. Again, the benchmark 620, but our organizational goal for EMS will be 9 minutes at the 90th percentile, 12 minutes for the rural, and then 17 minutes for our remote response areas. And then finally, our compliance methodology, and this is just how are we going to move forward, keep this process going. How are we going to measure, what metrics are we going to measure, and how are we going to ensure that we're using our best quality data. So quarterly and annual reporting are the requirements from the accreditation book, basically through their different criterion. The department switched to ESO for their RMS system and has dramatically improved their data quality just as a function of doing that. And then finally, they have Intero on board as well that has this information, these different overlays that you've seen. And so they can provide this information in real time throughout that or within that dashboard to get these answers. And then finally, I just wanted to summarize some of the critical issues that were apparent to us as we went through. They're not necessarily tied to the CRA SOC specifically, but were things that came out of this process that I think is important to mention. So staffing wise, volunteer staffing is just probably not going to be a viable or reliable source for y'all to have staffing from today or in the future. In departments that have hundreds of years under their belt as volunteer systems, they're struggling with your demographics within the community. Just, you may be able to get something initially going, but any kind of long-term viability is just not looking good. Probably the better option is going to be to go ahead and start analyzing other staffing options, methodologies, whether it be peak demand units, increased staffing. There's a lot of different ways to do it correctly. Just need to find the right way for Gig Harbor. Along with that is financial sustainability. Really need a unanimous support of future levy lid lifts to be able to sustain operations. And part of the reason for that is we're seeing inflation occur through fuel prices, cost of metals and materials, cost of shipping, availability of goods and services. And so as those costs continue to increase without the ability to meet suit within your funding mechanism, the ability to sustain current operations could be impacted. And finally, capital facilities, your fire stations are nearing the end of their intended lifespan. They're still in pretty good shape, but we've got a capital facilities plan to address this. It's still a little unclear at this point exactly how it's going to be funded. I understand that some movement has been made on that, and that's more than likely a non-issue moving forward. But then as part of this, we went ahead and ran a station optimization. And so the good news is the 5 stations you're staffing today are the ones that should be staffed for optimal performance within the system. And so with that, this was just an overview of the highlights of the report. That concludes my presentation, and we'll stand for any questions.
All right, any of the commissioners have any questions regarding the presentation?
This may be impossible to answer, but going through the complete survey results, I was struck by how positive the commentary was. Is that pretty typical for you to see that with fire departments that you do work for?
Sometimes, we met with command staff earlier. We were kind of telling a joke. We did a project in the Northeast, and we were amazed at how many people had input about things like hose clamps and accordion lays. It seemed like a very engaged group. But no, I think that probably what we would see would be a better mix of disagree along with agree. I think in general, this group, I think from the people who took the survey, at least for what it's worth, they understand that providing services, there's a cost associated, and that I think if they had the information that they needed, that they are willing to invest additional tax dollars into funding those services. And again, we only got a small cross section of people who took the survey, but initially it appears that they're supportive of the department, and that as long as they understand their needs, they're willing to do what needs to happen to fund that.
All right, looks like we got a question from the audience. Does the EMS response time reflect ALS or BLS response time, or just first unit response time?
It's going to be first unit response time. And so for each one of those metrics, because typically on fire calls, you're going to have multiple units responding. And so we're taking the best metric from each of those groups and providing that. So it could be an engine, it could be an ambulance, it could be ALS, it could be BLS, but that's when we got that responder on scene.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the group here? Well, we have them. Well,
Hey, Commissioner.
yes, sir.
Hey, just kind of, we can still ask more questions, but to give some credit, I want to do Chief Langlow and the entire staff just did a really good job working with Dynamics and providing them the information. This was a heavy lift for them. And I also want to recognize Chief Burgess and Watson and Nixon. All three of them started this. All three of them worked really hard on this. And, I don't want to forget all the work that they did and the foundation that they laid, especially Chief Nixon, because he did an internal standard of cover and laid the groundwork for it. Something else that I wanted to talk about is I know you know this and Stuart talked about it, but this is a snapshot in time as of today. And it's a good start. We've shined a light on an issue that we have in our data analytics. Stuart and Mary Ellen did a great job of pulling out a lot of information out of the data we had, but we've also found out that we got a lot of work to do. So let me give you a couple examples. We were unable to parse out emergent and non-emergent calls. That our data just isn't there. And so if you look at all of this, some of this includes emergent and non-emergent. So two things that we can start off between now and January, we're making a list of the things that we need to improve on for our data analysts. And then we'll be able to start getting some good, clean data. Just that alone, when we went emergent and when we went non-emergent, is going to change a lot of our response times in the future. So I don't want to get too worked up about what we have right now. We have what we have, and it is what it is. And it's a place that we're going to be able to improve. And one of those is data analytics. We've got Intera working with us, and we're going to improve that. It's going to take a lot of training. Also, something else that we're going to be able to improve on is our turnout time with the awareness. That's going to be a quick change. We're also, Chief Meyer is working on our response packages. We're going to go to 3-person engine companies at the beginning of this year. We're going to change our response packages, who goes on what. And this was also built on a volunteer dispatch run cards, where we have a whole bunch of resources. So we're going to narrow what's down. So I want to let you know that just changing just emergent and non-emergent to fixing our data to focusing on turnout time. A lot of this is going to change over the next year, but that's okay. So I just want to kind of lay that groundwork and that expectation for the standard to cover, that it's what we have. It's a snapshot today, and we've already noticed some things that we need to improve on, and we will.
So Chief,
right.
along those lines, I'm looking at figure 124 in the document, which is average emergency travel time. And so my assumption is that the emergency travel time, because we're not able to differentiate between emergent, non-emergent, that emergency travel time covers all of those responses. So I know there's a lot of medical calls where we have our people responding routine, not lights and sirens, which, you know, is a different category of call, obviously, but it sounds like that's all dumped into the same bucket in this report through no fault of the authors of the report. Just that's the data that we were able to give them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say. So, you know, just in our first year, you're going to see, I hope, or I think, or I assume that we're going to see some changes just in making some of those response packages changes, some training, and then changing what we call emergent and non-emergent is going to be a big difference next year. And we'll start giving quarterly reports on this. We're going to start with our dashboards with Intera for you, and our companies will be able to follow it. So lots of improvements will come. So yes, Commissioner.
All right. Any other questions for the Dynamics group before we move on?
There's one from the audience, if you don't see it, Alex.
Do you know if South Sound 91 is any closer to universal call taker? The call pressing times are very concerning to me. And I can answer that one. Yes, Steve. And this is Steve Nixon asking all the questions out here. So, hey, Chief, how are you? Yes, they are moved to universal call taker here shortly. Law has already done it, and then fire will be very soon. So I think those numbers will be getting adjusted. But the other thing they also went to is they changed their software, their answering software. So they went to a priority dispatch, which, as you may know, takes a little bit longer to actually dispatch a call because they're getting more data, you know, on the front side of the call. They are paying attention to that. Some of the fire chiefs, including myself, although we don't use it where I work, but you know, everybody else in the county is now with South Sound 911. So there have been some concerns about that in the past. They say they've put in other kind of stop gaps or easy outs for the dispatchers to get the rigs going sooner. But I think that everybody in Pierce County be a close eye on priority dispatch and then universal call taker. So,
Alex, yeah, Carl's in. It looks like he has a question.
In the last time I looked at the data, if I recall correctly, it was about an 8-minute time for flashover or brain death. And as I see this data, it appears that there is no hope of attaining an 8-minute arrival time. Am I looking at that right when you combine dispatch and turnout and travel?
I would say maybe it's going to be situationally dependent, but in some situations, yes, in some situations, no. That 90th percentile is, we're going to do this well 90% of the time or better. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we've got that 8-minute window we're trying to achieve, and at the 90th percentile, we're at 10 minutes. So within that, a certain portion, yeah, we wouldn't make it there within 8 minutes. But for a larger portion, but we would make it there within the 8 minutes, if that makes sense, right? Because if we have 90% at 10 minutes, maybe we're at 70%, we're at 8 minutes. Once this data is updated, you know, we could find that answer specifically. It would be easy enough to run through Intera or through ESO, either one, for them to develop that answer. For the purpose of this report, we did it strictly based on NFPA 1710. So we weren't really getting in the weeds of that. We were looking at where are our baselines, where are we at currently at 90th percentile? How does that compared to the national standard of the gap analysis, and then providing organizational goals for both performance and for staffing. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, well, one other thing, it seems like as a backup to my question, brings up the question of location of stations. And so we haven't looked at any of that to see if you said they were optimum the way it is. But might those changes develop a better response time? Some changes, I don't know.
Well, what I would say is based on the historical data we had up to probably about a year ago, I don't know that I would want to hang my hat solely on that information. Moving forward, and since about 2020, I think our data quality is much better and it's going to continue to improve. And I think at that point, doing a station optimization, not only with only our current 9 locations, but maybe some potential others, and then determining what are the optimal locations based on what we could actually acquire and or build upon and things of that nature. That would be an outstanding question. But, I think just as we move to the next year to 2 years or 3 years, depending on what your timelines are, as the data quality improves and we start getting a little more serious about pulling the trigger, absolutely do those analyses and let's answer those questions. So that way, if we're committing $4.5 to $6 million, on a fire station, we, to the very best of our ability, know that it's in the right place for today and it's going to be in the right place for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, and I just kind of want to piggyback on the end of, Carl's question there. And we also have a question from Mr. Hargroves in the audience, and he's asking how often would additional survey input occur on an ongoing time frame, if at all. And it will, and I think Stuart just talked to about a little bit. And, the problem you have with some of these surveys is the fact that the target's always moving, right? Either they're changing the minutes on the response zone or what the response zone looks like, or we're adding resources and firefighters to rigs, which change the outcome as well. So there's those two variables that are going to shift and flux for us, especially over the next few years, that we will want to readdress this information and take a look, because Gig Harbor is ever changing faster than a lot of us hope for. And with that, I think a lot of that I'm more interested, that remote number that they presented is always going to be there, right? We're always going to have a remote area in our district, I think, no matter what happens. But I'm more that intermediate zone is where I think we can get the most improvement out of, and continuing to look at the survey data and adding resources and looking at the moving ball of what the district looks like will accomplish that work and move on. So thank you guys for those questions.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on that, we plan on doing, quarterly updates, and with our Intera data analytics program, that'll be live data that we can be looking at all the time. So we'll be continuously looking at data and doing quarterly updates on the standard of cover of where we are and how our performance is doing.
All right. Any more questions for the Dynamics group while they're here? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for coming up, and glad you made it out, and we'll, I'm sure, see you again.
Absolutely. You all have a good night. Thank you so much for choosing us, and we are just so happy we had a chance to assist you.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Stuart and Mary Ellen, and we appreciate all your work. And like I said, we got the first draft, and the entire command staff went over it, and there wasn't hardly we didn't find many mistakes at all, and that's pretty amazing for this big of a document. They did an excellent job. Commissioners, it's up to you, Commissioner Wilsey, but on a timeline to adopt the standard of cover, whether you want to do it next meeting or the meeting after, but I'll look to you on how to do that.
I think Chief Langlow has put the link out, correct? Is that has been made public, at least to the department so far? But I think we'll do that for let that be out there and open so everybody can see it. And then next meeting we'll take some action. Okay. see if give everybody another chance to ask any questions after reviewing the document. So if everybody's okay with that, I'm seeing some nodding heads, so we'll stick with that plan. So moving on in the agenda, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the October 12th regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes. All right, how about some voucher approvals? We made it without you last meeting, Commissioner Nelson.
I'll move that we approve the accounts payable vouchers as outlined in the agenda totaling $334,525.15.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the vouchers and accounts payable. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes. All right, any reports from 3390 tonight?
I talked to the local just an hour or so ago, and they have nothing today.
Perfect. So that takes us right to you there, Chief.
Great, thank you. Chief Langlow is going to give a quick update on promotions.
Okay, quick update. Yeah, on Chief's report for a couple items. First, Chairman Wilsey, yes, the link, before I forget, the link for the Dynamics, the full standard of cover report is on our public website. And so it's available to our internal and any external members of the community or otherwise that would like to see it. And so yeah, the full draft is up on the website and available. Okay, promotional exams. So we have completed our promotional exam, the examination portion that will that covers the list, the lieutenant and battalion/division chief list that goes live January 1st of 22 for a 24-month period. The list is a provisional list right now. We have a contractual agreement with Local 3390 for a 3-week window where folks can confirm that all of the number metrics for their exam scores were calculated accurately and make sure everything's in order. And then we will look for that list to move from provisional status to final list on or about the 11th of November, which is Veterans Day, so maybe the 12th. And that list will go live January 1st of 2022. We had 16 lieutenant candidates, 14 lieutenant candidates and 2 battalion chief/division chief candidates take the test. And so we anticipate some vacancies immediately on January 1st with the transition to 4 platoon. And so Chief Doan and Chief Meyer will be doing chief's interviews the week of November 15th. They will actually be doing them on the 17th, 18th, and 19th of November. That will help us establish who the new officers will be moving into 2022. I'd like to thank Chi Harrington, our HR program manager, for leading the charge on the promotional process. Her help was integral to the smooth operation of the process. And then briefly wanted to touch on 4 platoon. On the schedule, the timeline that we've been working under, we plan on going live with 4 platoon on January 1st of 2022. And we have met or exceeded our timeline benchmarks thus far. And so we don't see any reason why that January 1st date will be any issue whatsoever. So we look to do that on the 1st, and we will be doing knocking off a couple more steps in the process along the way, the promotional test being one of them, shift bidding, vacation picks, and debit day assignments. Those are just a couple highlights that we'll be working through, but we look for that to happen on 1/1 of 22. And Chief Doan, that's what I have for my chief's report. Chairman Wilsey, if you have any questions, I'd be certainly able to try to answer those.
All right, thank you. For me, we have on the capital facilities plan front, we have the CFP is on our website also. We also have the work session in which Chief Johnson presented it to us and to the commissioners is also on our website. We have scheduled for November 9th to present that again. We've been refining it a little bit, and on November 9th, we will present the capital facilities plan and then take public input until December 14th. So that process is moving ahead and moving forward. Job offers, we have offered 3 paramedic laterals, conditional job offers, and 6 entry-level firefighters. We found out that of the 6, we had 2 male firefighters and 4 females. One of the males has turned it down, taken another job offer. So we had somebody waiting and moved her up. So it will be 1 male and 5 females now. If somebody else drops out, gets offered another job, we have somebody else waiting in the wings. So they should be starting January-ish, January, February. We're still working through that. They still have to do background checks and all the stuff through the conditional offer. Also, I have given a conditional offer to Deputy Chief Perry Oldenburg as the next Assistant Chief of Finance and Administration. We're working through that conditional offer to meet, to do the background check and all the same things. And then we're also working on negotiating a personal services contract with him. We have mandatory respect in the workforce training coming for the entire department, and then some extended training for all supervisors coming up in the next month. I met with Creston Barr, the superintendent from Peninsula School District, and I think it was last week. We spent a couple hours together. It was great to get to know her and work on how we can partner together, and had a great meeting. We also had last Thursday and Friday 2 days of some leadership training for the command and general staff, and we brought in I taught half of it, and the other half was taught by an outside consultant, and it was well received, and we're looking forward to more leadership training. That is all I have for updates from the chief, unless anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you, Chief. I don't see anything, so we'll move on. Any standing committee reports this evening? I don't think we do, so we'll move on. Financial report, Chief Langlow. You're still muted there, Chief, and I'd imagine this one might be a little bit brief since we've got the big presentation coming up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll keep this one high level and brief, but I'm going to share my screen here just so you guys, so people can see it out in the Zoom sphere. It's in your board packet, but okay, so this is the monthly financial report for the month that closed out.
Your screen changed there, Chief.
What's that?
Your screen changed. We're looking at the budget, not the financial report.
Oh, okay. How about that? Is that better, Tanya?
Yes, it is. You're good now.
Thank you. Okay, so monthly financial report for the month that closed out September 2021. We're 75% of the year complete. As you work down the revenue, we I noted this last month, but just note as we work down the revenue, the year to date is on the revenue side 61.99, tracking behind the percent of the year complete. But like I mentioned last month, that is a direct reflection of the fact that we get our a bolus of our revenue and property tax in April and October. So we're getting that as we speak. So I would expect for the rest of the year and the last 3 remaining financial reports for the rest of the year, we'll be seeing that catch up. We'll be seeing that catch up without question. And so I would highlight on the revenue side, the year-over-year change is actually slightly ahead, almost 3% ahead of where it was last year. So that would be a reflection of that we'll see those numbers change as property tax dollars come in. Also shown in 57.77% of our year-to-date budget for property tax. So we're moving in the right direction there. On the expense side, again, high level, total expenses down here at the bottom, 71.24. So we're tracking slightly under budget by just over 3.5% on the expense side, which is good. And so we're in a good spot. Moving forward, the budget is tracking along nicely. And then, like I said, we'll see these revenue numbers catch up as we get that big bolus of property tax in October. And so that is the monthly financial report.
All right, thank you, Chief. Are there any questions for the monthly finance report? All right, seeing none, I'll kind of move on to my chairman's report. I don't have a lot for you this month. I'd just like to say that myself, Commissioner Sudich, and Chief Meyer were at the South Sound 911 ribbon cutting yesterday. Very nice affair. Sorry if somebody else was there that I did not see, but I don't know. Chief, were you there? I didn't see you, but I could have missed you.
I was in Seaside, Oregon. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, nice affair, a beautiful facility. A lot of the dispatchers that work there are very thankful and grateful to have such a nice facility, one that gives them some nice de-stressing rooms and also a little bit of a break from some of the places that we formerly called dispatch centers that look like prison wards. So very nice facility again, and hopefully we'll get a lot of years of use out of it. So with that, go ahead, Kevin.
You mean it's an improvement from the downstairs dispatch center at the old city county building?
Yeah, just a little different than that. Yeah.
All right, good.
You gotta go by and take a look sometime. It's very impressive. It's very nice for those folks. So I'm glad that we finally were able to get that done. There was a lot of years put in to get that building built. So,
Kevin, are you saying the county city building isn't a nice place to work?
Not if you're a dispatcher downstairs. It's a basement.
There's a couple places there, but we won't get into that. So, all right, there isn't any old business on the agenda, so we'll move right into new business. And it looks like we've got our revenue hearing and presentation of the third draft for the budget.
That's correct. I'm back. Okay, if somebody give me a thumbs up that you see the revenue hearing for fiscal year 2022. Okay, thank you. All right, we will work through the revenue hearing for 2020, the fiscal year 2022. So a taxing district other than the state that collects regular levies must hold a public hearing on revenue sources for the district's following year's current expense budget. That's RCW 84-55-120. And so this presentation will serve as meeting that requirement. So we'll move through the PowerPoint, and then I'm happy to entertain questions at the end if you have them. So just as a reminder, we have statutory rate limitations of 1% growth year over year. We do have a voter approved 6-year lid lift limit at 6% to raise that cap from 1% to 6%. Next year, the fire or general lid lift will be in year 5 of 6, and the EMS lid lift will be in year 6 of 6. So with the increase, I'm sure that many of you have noticed, or probably all of you noticed in your green postcard that you got from the county, your assessed valuation changed quite a bit for most of us year over year, and quite a bit above the 6% for probably the majority. And so what that does to our levy is that means that it erodes year over year, because we're limited and capped at the 6% growth. But when property values on the peninsula escalate anywhere north of 6%, there's levy erosion. And so next year, our levies, both the regular and EMS levy, will have eroded further. They will be at $1.37 and 44 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, respectively, which is a total, just as a reminder, is a total of $1.81 of the voter approved $2. So our levies will have eroded a grand total of 19 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. Property tax assessed valuation. So this year we're operating off of an assessed valuation of a fire district at $13,544,698,031. Next year, that number grows to $15,400,534,823. That's a increase of 13.7%. But again, we unless it's new construction or specific improvements, we're limited at the 6% cap. So that's the difference between where the district as a whole went and what we can capture. These are what our on the fire or regular levy. These are our property tax numbers, revenue numbers. 2021, the year we're operating in, 19,617,000 and change. 2022 is 21,063,103 for a 7.4% change year over year. So that's largely going to be our 6% cap plus any new construction and improvements. On the EMS levy, we're looking at a change from 6.3 million to 6.7. Again, that it tracks along the same percentage change. So property tax summary, grand total, working into 2022 for our budget, $27,827,564. We do have other sources of tax revenue. They're significantly less when compared to our property tax revenue sources that we have with the EMS and the general levy. We do get sale of title property held by Pierce County, private timber harvest, leasehold excise tax. These are some examples. Much smaller in comparison to property tax, like I mentioned. We'll see those broken out a little bit more detail here in a minute. We do have two examples of grant and interdepartment funds. We have a FEMA SAFER grant that we're operating under. 2022 will reflect months 22 through 33 of a 36-month grant. So we will be working on the last full year of the grant. And we also charge a PSORT, pretty nominal, but a PSORT administration fee because we're the lead agency on PSORT within the county. We also have charges for service, ambulance, and GEMT transport fees. And then those will get broken out a little bit more specifically on the budgeted revenue page of the third draft of the budget, and we'll break them out a little more specifically here in a minute in this presentation. We also have first aid and other classes registrations. The other class, largely crunch time. We have not done that the last couple of years because of COVID. But the way that we budget for crunch time is we budget the revenue and we budget the expense to be the same. So if the class doesn't happen, we don't generate the revenue, but that also means we don't have the expense. All right, here's a little roll up of the summary of other sources, other tax. Like I said, leasehold, private timber harvest, and tax title property, $34,710. Other sources of revenue, interest from our expense and reserve investment accounts, $36,132. That's really a reflection of interest rates that are awfully low right now. Donations, $3,000. Other miscellaneous just kind of a roll up of L&I reimbursements, or kind of just the other category that gets captured in there. $39,750. First aid and crunch time, $48,980. Intergovernmental charges, that's our P-Sort admin fee. Safer grant, $650,000. Charges for services, contracts for service, $415,039. Those examples listed there, or those items listed below that, are examples of our contracts for service. Ambulance transport, GEMT, 2.750 million expected in revenue for fiscal year 2022. Revenue rolled up as a summary and from all sources. You got the property tax, other taxes, charges for services, and other sources, for a grand total of $31,805,535. And that, Mr. Chairman, concludes the revenue hearing for fiscal year 2022.
All right. Any questions on the revenue hearing? All right. Seeing no questions, we need to vote for approval for that, don't we? Yep. So do I have a motion to approve the 2022 budget planning revenue hearing?
Budget, excuse me. Motion to approve the 2022 budget hearing.
It's not working.
Or
I'll second it. All right. Any other discussion on it? All right. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes. All right. On to the next one there, Chief Langlow.
Okay. I fear by the end of the meeting, you're going to be all sick and tired of hearing from me. So I'll do my best to keep it moving and brief. Okay, this is the third reading of the budget for 2022. And as we work through the third draft of the budget, as I come to the specific divisions, legislative, finance and records, et cetera, I will reference and give an answer to a question that we received from one of our citizens, Carl Kreitzer, last meeting, regarding the year-over-year change for each budget category. So I'll reference those. Those aren't specifically listed in the budget document, but I have those numbers, and I'll be able to reference those as we move through the document. So we also, in this reading of the budget, in this draft, we've updated our charts and graphs that will look like they do come the final draft at the end of November. And so we've updated our charts and graphs to reflect accordingly. So you'll see the assessed valuation number for Fire District 5 for 2022. That's what I referenced in the revenue hearing. Then next is new construction and improvements. That's the number we get from the county assessor's office. So we're looking at 181,595, 877. There's the levy rate that I mentioned, $1.80, 1.806. So I rounded up to $1.81 in my revenue presentation when I gave that, but that's the actual levy rate rounded to that many digits. Property tax collection rate. And then we go to the revenue roll-up page. That was the same page that you saw from draft 2, with some slight adjustments to our cash carry forward as we establish what programs or items we were able to fund out of the 2021 with 2021 monies, or items that we had to move into 2022. The dollars will still carry forward, and we will spend the items on items that we have either approved in the budget or have deemed necessary through board action by the commissioners. we'll just move the money forward into 2022. Our supply chain issues have not fully resolved, ironically, in the last couple of weeks. So we're continuing to battle some of that, and our ability to get things has been impacted. So there's your total available for expenses at 33,028,287. This is also included are the preliminary documents from the county that talk about for both our regular levy and EMS levy that help us generate the numbers on the revenue page. This next graph is specific to the makeup of expenditures moving into 2022 by type. And so you've got salaries and benefits are the biggest driver, which they are every year. And so salaries and benefits make up a little bit over 80% of the budgeted expenses by type. The goal we have organizationally is between 80 and 85. And so we're right on par with that. And then the other slices of the pie here represent the other expenditures for the budget. As we move down to the next page, budget share by division, not surprisingly, 48.9% of the budget, and it goes to suppression, with the next highest being EMS 17.89. And so our suppression and EMS, that's where all of our line staff employees live in relation to the budget. And so that's why they have the biggest chunk of the budget. All right, this is the roll-up summary page on the expense side. So expenses match the revenues to the dollar, balanced budget. I think I'm going to take just a minute here, and this is where I'm going to highlight some of the year-over-year change for each budget category. So legislative and commissioners, that budget line item compared to last year is actually down 4.69%. Finance and records is going to be up 5.17%. Information technology and data processing, that number is increasing 40%. And the biggest driver in that I want to highlight is that's where we have added the GIS data analyst. That's a new position that we've never had at the organization before. So that is where we have tucked that position, their salary and benefits. And so that would be the driver in that large change. In that budget line number, fire control and suppression, 12.94% increase. Fire control administration, 3.33% increase. Alarm and communications, that's a 11.28% decrease. Fire control prevention, 25.99% increase. We have reclassified some programs into fire prevention, and then we also have a prevention firefighter funded at the full 12 months, which makes up a large chunk of that increase there. Fire control training, 22.07% increase. Fire control facilities is a 14% decrease. Fire control fleet is a 62% increase. That's a reflection of capital projects that we're purchasing. That's where all of our capital purchases, fire engines, medic units, that's where all of that lives. And so we did some reclassification. Then you'll see in the budget that we're going to be able to fund some capital projects out of our operating budget with cash. And so that's the increase there. Emergency EMS medical aid services increase of 5.08%. And the final one is EMS administration increase of 3.27%. So the grand total budget increase year over year is 11.11%. Okay, let's move down into the specific budget pages. Between the second and third draft, we had very little change. In any substantial areas, we may have moved moved an expense to a different page if it was deemed more appropriate living in that area. We also received our final numbers from Central Pierce as far as our IT consortium costs. So there's been some updates in those. I'll work through the each page of the budget here, but there wasn't much significant change from version 2 to version 3. So legislative and legislative/commissioners, no significant change, no change, I don't think at all in that budget line. Finance, records and administration. We'll go down to the detail page. No, shouldn't be no significant change there. Okay, information technology data processing. Down to the detail page. This is where our a pretty good chunk of our Central Pierce IT consortium costs live, and so we did a little bit of change to this budget area here, just identifying once we refined from Central Pierce the cost that Central Pierce bores. And then other costs that we're responsible for. The reason for the orange is those are some numbers we're continuing to refine and finalize with Central Pierce, and that will be finalized and updated between now and the final adjustments that are made before the board adopts the budget on the 23rd of November. Fire control suppression. Go down to the detail page here. I realize this is pretty small. Let me try to zoom in here a little bit. So no significant changes here from version 2 to version 3. Some items that were likely yellow or a color on the previous version the color's been removed because we've identified that those are just items that need to get finished in 2022, not 2021. So they're here to stay in the 2022 budget. Fire control administration. No change here. Communications, this is another area where some of our IT costs live. Go down to the roll-up page here. And this is also where our radio subscriber fee and South Sound 911 dispatch fees live. No change, significant change in this area from version 2 to version 3. Prevention, again, no significant change. We're looking in prevention, we're pretty excited. I know Chief Beerstrom's pretty excited to bring back some programs that we have historically funded. Well, we funded them in the budget for several years, but because of COVID, we haven't been able to do that. And so I know Chief Beerstrom and Chief Waters are excited to bring some of those back. And so we should hopefully see some of those expenses start to happen in 2022. Fire control and training. The only thing I'll highlight in this one, under Career Recruit Academy, we're just finalizing numbers for the academy that we're going to use and what their charges for 2022 are going to be. So we'll have a slight adjustment here in the third draft of the budget. Fire control facilities maintenance. It's another area where there would have been a change in this budget code 522504704. That is where some more of our Central Pierce IT consortium costs live. So we refined that area a little bit, and so that you will notice a change in that area. And then the orange at the bottom is we're just finalizing with Chief John Johnson a couple numbers to make sure that we feel good about where we're at in those repairs by others. Fire control vehicle maintenance. This is where some of the increase lives in some of our fleet and our capital projects that we intend to fund moving forward into 2022. And so didn't change really much between version 2 and version 3. One thing we have added here, type 1 engine ×3 delivery in 2023. Obviously $10,000 won't cover the cost of 3 fire engines, but because it's more than a 12-month process to get engines from order to delivery. We're putting some money aside for Chief Johnson to work on just getting the project rolling with the expectation that we would take delivery of type 1 fire engines in 2023. Emergency medical services, medical aid. No change from version 2 to version 3. Almost to the end here. EMS, MSO, and admin. No change from version 2 to version 3. And then here at the bottom, I've included in your board packets kind of a roll up of some of the high level items that we intend to fund in 2022. As we move forward, I think Chief Bierstrom and Chief Burgess have done this in the past, and I think it's been well received by the board just to help identify and pull out within a really big budget with a lot of lines, some of the highlights that we want to make sure that we highlight with the board and with everybody that wants to have an interest in looking at the budget. And so it breaks it into capital facilities, items, labor, equipment, training. And so this is just something for those that would like to look at it to have a little more of a detailed roll up or summary, if you will, on the 2022 budget items that are new. They're either new and never been in the budget before, or they're items that were new in previous years that we weren't able to fund because of COVID or because of a program wasn't available. And so that's what the summary is on that page. And that concludes draft 3 of the budget. One thing before I close out on draft 3, I'll stop sharing here, but one thing I wanted to mention is that we received word from Local 3390 and the Medical Trust that premium increases next year will actually be, again, will be a pass-through of 0% premium increase, so a flat change in premium increase year over year. We had built an assumption into the budget up until this point of a 6% inflator. And because that number is going to be 0, there will be some adjustment in the budget moving from version 2 to version 3. That 6% number is worth about a little north of $150,000. And so we'll be evaluating as a command staff and as a team on what we think is best suited for that number moving forward. But I wanted to highlight that there will be that change moving into version 3 of the budget. So whether it's a capital expenditure that we want to add or something different, we will be evaluating that as a team. But the Health and Welfare Trust again has requested a 0% premium change from 2021 to 2022. And Mr. Chairman, that's the third draft reading of the budget.
All right. Any questions for Chief Langlow for the third draft here? Everybody speak there.
Just a thank you, Chief. You've been on camera all night. Thank you.
Well, he's got a ways to go yet too.
That's
Alex,
right.
I don't have a question. I have a comment on a couple things. First off, I think we talked a lot about capital facilities. I see that we're talking about putting a canopy up at 59 for a hazmat vehicle, which is not a big expense, but I think that that's an example of why we've got to do this work on our facilities, because obviously we're talking about parking stuff outside in the weather, and we have to build a canopy to accommodate that because our stations just can't fit our equipment anymore. And then the two other things that I wanted to point out more just for the community who's watching is I see we're buying a medic unit. I think that's our 6th since 2015. So that means we've replaced all of our medics. And I think that that's a good thing. And then I'm particularly excited. Chief Doan mentioned that we're talking about buying kind of a different sort of apparatus for Station 53. And I know over the years I've talked to, Chief Meyer, Chief Johnson, Lieutenant Johnson about these kind of different engines and how they could be cheaper and more effective. So I'm excited for that to be kind of a pilot going forward. And if it works, maybe we can save some money by using those in other areas of the district as well.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Any other comments or questions for Chief Lang?
I got a couple. This Carl Kreitzer. I live in Gig Harbor. Nick, from an old budget guy out in the Zoom field, let me just say good job. I know there's an emphasis on old, but that's the way it goes. I do have a couple questions. Is the 15-passenger van, is that a replacement or is that a new vehicle?
Yeah, good question, Carl. That is a new vehicle, and what we intend to use that for largely is the training division moving our recruits to and from different recruit events. What we're doing now when we split up the 12 is we put them in 3 or 4 or 5 vehicles to get them places, and we want to be able to narrow that down and neck that down to 1. And we anticipate being able to use that vehicle for quite a few other things throughout the district, but it is a new vehicle.
Second thing, the medic unit, I just heard Bryce make the comment, that's a replacement vehicle, correct?
It will be a replacement for our oldest vehicle oldest or least reliable unit in the fleet, depending on what AC John Johnson decides.
And then there's 400,000 for a brush engine. Now there's some other activity on brush I see on the budget, so I don't know exactly what applies to what, but is that a new vehicle or is that a replacement?
Yeah, I can run down that real quick. That's pretty straightforward. So the 400,000 for the Type 3 brush engine will be a replacement for the current engine that's at Station 53, which is a Type 1 brush, which is not a Type 1 brush engine, is a Type 1 engine. Type 3 is a classification of engine that we actually have never had in the district before, and so that's a new vehicle, and it will replace the Type 1 engine that's currently at Station 53 that I believe was manufactured in the early 90s. And then the brush, the F550 chassis to remount the skid on brush 52, that will be a new chassis for our current brush 52. So that's a replacement. And I think, and then we're going to use the current chassis we have for brush 52. That's why it's referenced again. To build a flat deck on the back for our logistics and vehicle maintenance folks. So technically that'll be repurposed, but it'll be a vehicle that we haven't ever had before. So somewhat of a hybrid between new and existing.
So the brush engine is essentially a replacement and it'll be at 53, is that right?
That's the plan that we're working on moving into 2022, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Chief Langwell? All right. With that, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the 3rd draft of our budget.
Alex, do we need to, I don't know that we need to approve the draft. I think we just approve the final version at the next meeting.
Excuse me, that's correct. Thank you. So no others on that, then we'll move on to the next resolution there. Chief Langlow, you're on again.
Okay, I'm getting my FaceTime in on the Zoom this evening. Okay, we have a couple resolutions. They're not, let me look down my list and so I don't misspeak. They are not new resolutions. They are existing resolutions that we're making changes to, more or less would be categorized as housekeeping. So I think we're going to talk about this a little bit in good of the order, but Danette Wayne is retiring actually on Friday. Her last day of work is Friday. So we're very happy for Danette that she's going to be able to get into the next phase of life in retirement. But Danette served by name and or title in a couple different areas of our district that dealt with board resolution and policy. And so we needed to update some of those and make some changes so that we had the right people noted in the correct spots. And so that's largely the theme of these resolutions. That's why there's so many of them, a reflection of where Danette fit into the organization. And so the first resolution is in relation to following persons are granted exclusive signature authority on behalf of Pierce County Fire District 5 at the financial institutions listed above, which is Columbia Bank, Bank of America, and Key Bank, to accomplish day-to-day transactions, operation, and correspondence. And so we are adding Jennifer Bruce, our finance specialist. She's taking over some of the accounts receivable functions that Danette was doing. And then we are also adding back to the resolution Chief Bierstrom. One of the things we've identified in the process is a little more redundancy in a couple different areas with authorized signers will be beneficial. And so we've added Dan back into that to provide a little more redundancy in the system. And so those are the two changes that we have for this resolution. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this one, but if you don't have any questions, we would recommend your adoption of resolution 2021-18.
Any questions from the commissioners for that one?
I'll move that we approve resolution 2021-18.
Second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes. All right, next.
Okay, the next resolution, which is 2021-19, deals with voucher approvals submitted by Pierce County and produces warrants in the amount of the voucher approvals at the district's request. And so what we're doing here is we are removing Danette, not removing Danette. We're adding the Assistant Chief of Administration, the Assistant Chief of Health, Safety, and Emergency Preparedness to that. That's really, that speaks to the redundancy in the system. We have found on a couple occasions, not something that stopped a business, but the need to have one extra person, one extra assistant chief level officer on the list to be able to sign the voucher approvals and to be an auditing officer for the district. So we're adding, it'll be Fire Chief Dennis Doan, it's just by position, Fire Chief, Assistant Chief of Finance and Administration, and the Assistant Chief of Health, Safety, Emergency Preparedness will be appointed as auditing officers for the district. And if in the absence of any questions, we would entertain adoption of 2021-19.
So moved. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded with no further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes.
All right, resolution number 3, 2021-20. So this is one of the areas that Danette Wayne served as for us in the district. She was the privacy officer, privacy compliance officer, and public records officer for the fire district. And with her retiring, we needed to make a change to make sure we had that position spoken for and identified, because that is the expectation at the state level. And so what we're doing here is changing from the administrative manager to the privacy officer and public records officer will be filled by the Assistant Chief of Administration and Finance. And that's the only change to the resolution, is just the title of who will serve in that role. And so again, without any questions, we would recommend adoption of 2021-20.
So moved. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. There's no more further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 2021-21. This is, this would fit into the adding redundancy into the system. And so this will add the Assistant Chief of Health, Safety, and Emergency Preparedness to be able to act on behalf of the board in matters of investment of fire district funds. So currently, right now, myself and Chief Doan are both on that resolution, and I'm largely handling those duties right now as we move funds from our expense investment fund to our expense fund, from our expense fund to our reserve fund, and this just adds some redundancy in the system. Our business practice up here at 5 will continue to be the same, that I will be the point, my position will be the point for that moving forward, but we'll just create some redundancy in the absence of myself or Chief Doan and the need to move money. Could be vacations or long-term absence or any of the sort. So just adding that Assistant Chief Admin and Assistant Chief of Health and Safety. 2020, that's 2021-21. We would recommend adoption in the absence of any questions.
Chief, one quick thing. I think there's a bit of a Scrivener's error here. In the first whereas paragraph, it says Fire Chief, Assistant Chief of Admin and Finance, or Assistant Chief of Health, Safety, and Emergency Preparedness. And then in the now therefore be it hereby resolved, it says Fire Chief, Assistant Chief of Admin and Finance, or Administrative Manager. My assumption is that the second paragraph is supposed to track the first.
Yes.
Okay. So
yes,
I would move that we approve this with that correction being made in the final document. Assuming that's what you wanted to do.
No, that is, yeah. Thanks for catching that, Commissioner Nelson. That is what we'd like to do, and I'm happy to push it to the next meeting, or we can do exactly as you described. That's up to you.
I think as long as I've made the motion that we have the two paragraphs consistent and it says the same in both, I'm good with going forward tonight.
So we have to approve as amended, and Joe just seconded. So Joe seconded the motion as amended. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 2021-22. We're getting towards the end here, I promise. This is in regards to the custodian for our advanced travel expense fund. This was held by Danette in her position. And so what we're doing here is the custodian of the advanced travel fund will now be the fire chief, the assistant chief of administration and finance, and the assistant chief of health, safety, and emergency preparedness. So we're essentially removing administrative manager and replacing with assistant chief of health, safety, and emergency preparedness. Other than that, the numbers stay the same, and the rest of the resolution, the content of the resolution would stay the same. So 2021-22 would be ready for approval unless you have any questions.
Seeing none.
I'll move that we approve resolution 2021-22.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes. Oh, last one, Chief Langley.
Last one.
Go.
That's one. I feel like we're on a good roll here. Resolution 2021-23. This is purely housekeeping. And we have a resolution on file for who can accept FEMA funds on behalf of the fire district. What I discovered here in updating our resolutions was that specifically noted on here was only one name, and it was Eric Watson. And so he is since retired, and so we need to update to make sure that we have the right position in place. And so I've done two things here. we've removed Eric from the be able to accept FEMA funds, and then we replaced with the position instead of the name. So as things change in the future, it will just live with the position. So what we've done is it says, therefore, the Assistant Chief of Administration and Finance is authorized to execute for and on behalf of Pierce County Fire District 5 in relation to FEMA funds. So that would be resolution 2021-23. And if you don't have any questions, we would recommend adoption.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes. All right, thank you, Chief Langlow. You get to take a break for a second. We got Chief Johnson up for some surplus equipment here.
Just when you
covering-
thought you were done with me. Oh, you want to take it, Chief?
Oh, I don't care. Yeah, I'll give you a break. How about that?
There you go.
I'm covering for Chief Johnson tonight. So Chief Johnson is asking in Resolution 2021-24 to surplus equipment. It's Fleet U19. It's a 1997 Chevy pickup with 164,673 miles. And we're asking for approval to Resolution 2021-24.
I'll move that we approve resolution 2021-24.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Incy,
Yes.
Commissioner Sudich,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Urbina,
Yes.
Chairman Wilsey.
Yes. All right, we made it through all our new business and all the resolutions, and what that kind of reminded me of is how much Danette has done for this district over her many years of service, and she will be sorely missed, and I wish her well in her retirement, and we'll announce it later on, but there is a retirement luncheon for her coming up this Friday. But anyway, that's going through all those resolutions. It really brings to light of how much she's done. So thank you. All right, with that, we have open public comment. Anyone wishing to come forward, please state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes. All right, I don't see any hands raised and I don't see any people moving in, so we will move on to good of the order. All right, Kevin, see your hands raised.
And I had the opportunity to attend the State Fire Commissioners Conference this past week and weekend, I guess. And I have to admit the programs they had just seemed like they were kind of reading Gig Harbor page of things that are going on. Thursday, they had one called Mission Impossible, and this was Central Pierce's, put on by Chief Oliver from Central Pierce, talking about what they did on their capital projects and how they moved through getting support and everything that they did with it. And so I sit there and I texted Chief Doan to say, hey, have you happened to talk with Chief Oliver about what they did and how they did it? And he said, that's where we got Liz Loomis from. So, so they were, they're on the ball there on that. So, and then that way also shows that I'm actually attending something and it wasn't just, gambling or something like that. And then Friday, they had quite a few good, some that you couldn't attend at the same time. One was put on by our own attorney in regards to finances. I've been through 2 of those, but the other one was in regards to post-traumatic stress and suicide. And that was a well-attended conference part there. There was a lot of people in that room listening to that. And the other one was in regards to the changes. And I brought a pamphlet home from the program in regards to what's occurring with the differences in regards to response from fire and police now, and legal standings, and what our expectations are as a fire department, and some things like that. So they were really interesting courses with a lot of good information in it. So I appreciate I always appreciate the chance to go to these as a fire commissioner, and you learn new things all the time. So it was a good conference.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Ency, for going and representing us. And yeah, I'm glad to hear that one part of the seminar was well attended. It's a very first rate problem in the fire service right now, and police as well. So, all right, any other good of the order? All right, seeing none. Special interest and upcoming events, like I said, this Friday, 10/28, Danette Wynn's retirement luncheon at 5:00. Is that correct?
Correction on that. It is Thursday.
Oh, it's Thursday. So it is, that's correct. Yes, 10/28 is Thursday. I'm trying to advance myself through this week already.
And yes,
right,
it is
Thursday.
at 5:00.
Thursday at 5:00. All right. And luncheon, I'm assuming it's at noon?
11:30 to 1:30.
11:30. All right. All right. Any other upcoming events we need to be aware of?
I'll be speaking Thursday morning at the chamber. It'll be probably one of the first times we bring up the possible bond. And so that'll be happening Thursday morning.
Is the chamber meeting live yet, Chief, or are they still Zoom?
Still Zoom.
Still Zoom. Okay. All right.
So Alex, one other thing to add, I think our consultants have dropped off, but looking at Pulse Point right now, it looks like we've got a medic unit at the hospital, a medic unit transporting, a medic unit on a call, and a Key Peninsula medic unit coming into Gig Harbor. So we're seeing that concurrency problem in real time right now. So their work, it shows that their work is accurate.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Key Pen, for coming and help us out. And hopefully those guys, all our medic units are taking care of folks and having good outcomes right now. All right. Anything else? Special interest or upcoming events? All right. Seeing none, this meeting will be adjourned. Our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, November 9th at 5 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
All right.